name's Ian Campbell from Palliative Care Australia in Canberra on the lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples. Welcome to Thursdays at 3, our regular series of conversations with people living and working at the end of life. A very real and personal conversation to share with you today, exploring the impact of Huntington's disease and what the palliative care sector needs to know, what we all need to know. Kathy Langley's family lives with the faulty gene that causes Huntington's disease and understands the disease all too well. Kathy joins us from her home in regional Victoria. Hello, Kathy.
Hi, Ian. How are you?
Good, thank you. I'm looking forward to learning from your family's experience today. What is Huntington's disease, Kathy? Let's start at the very beginning.
It's a rare genetic, neurological, I always get that word wrong,
The tricky one.
It's not a mental one, but it can be seen as that. There is no cure, and all children born to parents who are at risk, being tested positive or diagnosed, have also got a 50% chance of inheriting as well. So until they can be tested, they are also at risk.
Kathy, as you say, a neurological disease that's caused by a faulty gene, but just picking up on one thing you said there, that it seems like people often mistake it for a mental health illness. Is that right?
That's correct. Because of the symptoms, it can appear that way. There are many complex, many and varied complex symptoms in it, and it can be seen very much as a mental illness when it's not. It just affects them that way.
We'll get a sense of those symptoms as we hear about your family's experience. Tell us about your family's experience, Kathy, and your life, your history with Huntington's disease.
Okay, so yes, I'm born from a family of Huntington's disease. My father inherited it off his mother. She inherited it off her father, and it goes back. My father passed it on to, if you like, three of my siblings. I tested negative. There is another sibling who still we do not know. He was born much later and chose not to be tested.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And how did it play out, or how does it play out in your family with your father and the three siblings you point to?
Yeah, sure. With my father, the first signs that I could recall with him was losing that humorous side of himself. He became very serious. At the dinner table, this was very much apparent. We used to laugh, have a good time, discuss our days. And he became very serious and just tell us to eat our meal. And it continued on like that. And he became, more depressive. The first sibling, she wasn't like that. She was just more of the jerking, the jerking you hear about with Huntington's disease. She did a lot of that. And then the next sister, she sort of lost empathy, just very silent, said very little. Had a grumpy almost appearance, and then the next sibling, he was sort of just changing in his own ways. He, I can't say he was depressed or anything. He was he's just had his moments, and with my father too, he became, as time went by, he became really kind of argumentative. He would be accusing us of things, something we hadn't done. And there was a real mixture with them all. But like the sister I told you who had lost empathy, she wouldn't even talk,
So I can really get a sense of why it's often mistaken for a mental health illness. There's a real change of character that happens by the.
Yes, that's correct.
Yep.
Yeah, very definitely.
And Kathy, you also mentioned jerking, a sort of more physical symptom.
Yep.
Tell us a bit more about that sort of physical side of things.
Yes. As I said, the jerking, they can appear to look drunk. And I remember having my sister stay with the weekend to give my mother a bit of relief, and taking her shopping. And I remember thinking, if anyone says or does anything, look out for them, because I was very protective and defensive of her. But yes, she could not feed herself in the end without it ending up everywhere but in her mouth. And she was very independent, so she did not like that at all. Didn't like anyone helping her in any way.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it gets very much like that.
Kathy, I'm guessing your father has passed away. Are your siblings still alive and living with this?
No, they've all gone. So some of them lived in their 40s and the others went in their 50s.
And is it Huntington's disease that causes someone's death in the end, the progressive nature of the disease? Is it that what kills people in the end?
Generally, I have been told that some have actually got cancer and that's taken them. But what happens is, as I saw it with my family, it's like it weakens, say, my father, the bowel. It weakens an organ and they end up going with that. But it was Huntington's that triggered it, if you like.
So another physical symptom, another physical manifestation of the disease. Yeah.
Yes. And I might add too, when we're talking about mental illness, a lot of them end up in mental hospitals. So, and I actually asked a nurse, a mental nurse, how do they treat them? Do they treat them as mental patients or as Huntington's disease? And she said because they have never been taught anything else, they can only treat them as mental patients.
Mm-hmm. Kathy, what does quality of life look like for someone with Huntington's disease? How does someone still look for those little moments that bring joy or quality to someone's life? Is that possible with Huntington's disease?
For as long as it can be. It can. It's about finding out what they enjoy still, what gives them that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
My sister was into bushwalking, loved it until she could do it no more. My brother, he loved riding his bike, and that's what he did until he could do it no more. It's about finding what they like, and once that goes, there is nothing left.
Kathy, it sounds really similar almost to dementia or MND and that sort of trajectory.
It is actually known amongst the carers today as 3 diseases in the one. So they can get they relate it to those things, but instead of having the one disease, they end up having the 3 diseases in one. That is how it's seen, yes.
Kathy, here we are talking on Rare Diseases Day. How rare is Huntington's, or how common is Huntington's in Australia? Are cases growing? Where's it at?
Yes, it's growing. The last I heard, it was over 2,000 in Australia. It grows around about 10-15% each generation, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it is rare, but I have to say, because I've done a bit of research in recent times to relearn about how it is today compared to when it was with my lot, and knowing that there is still some in my family who could end up having it, for me, I began thinking, it's rare and there's not going to be many have it. By Jove, I found out I was wrong, that there were quite a lot out there. And this, for a rare disease, it's becoming more common.
Kathy, what do you want the palliative care community to know about looking after a family with Huntington's disease? What role have you seen palliative care play in your family's experience?
Well, the best thing is to learn about Huntington's disease and be able to understand and learn how to, work with them to better care for them. Because, for an example, my brother, he was in a place of a facility and end up in a hospital, but they did not know how to treat him. and they actually got a little scared of him because it is thrashing out and everything. But if you were to look into the disease and to learn how to deal with it, you see them more as they are, just human beings who have got an illness that they've got no control over.
It seems to be a common challenge always to see the person and not see the disease. It's
right.
great that you remind us of that, Kathy.
Yeah.
Kathy, you mentioned the fear that can be there around Huntington's disease and indeed similar diseases, similar conditions.
That's
What
right.
advice would you have for the community? What role can the community play in supporting a family with Huntington's disease? If your neighbours are dealing with it, if the people down the street are dealing with it, what advice would you have for the community in terms of supporting those families, those people?
Again, it's about learning about the disease, and once they learn about it, the education is really, really important. Once you learn about it and understand it better, then you're in a better position of offering help. Is there anything I can do for you? How can I help you? And it might be just a talk with the carer. It could be someone who can just sit down and talk with the patient themselves. If you can understand them, then you've got a better chance of relating to them, if you like.
Kathy, just thinking back over the experience you've had with your siblings and your dad and that message that you just delivered so beautifully about remembering the person, were you able to still see your loved ones within the disease, even though the physical symptoms were there, the emotional symptoms were playing out? Were you still able to recognise them along the way?
Yeah. Yes, I could see it. And it's probably one of the things that stays with me today, in that I can try to help getting it out there and remembering their faces and remembering who they were as people. You've got to remember they are still human who have got their own thoughts. I can tell you, my brother, for one, very frustrated with he knew what was going on, but because he presented with the symptoms as being someone totally different, other people couldn't see that. But he had a nurse actually who really got on well with him, and the talk she told me, he was with it. There was no doubt about it. So when you get to know them, you can see the persons, their personality.
It's good of you to remember that nurse that you mentioned there. Often there are special people during these sort of care journeys, aren't they? That make the difference. What are some of those things that nurses, that doctors, that social workers perhaps did along the way that really made a difference to your loved ones?
Well, this particular nurse, she used to sit down and talk with him. And I got to say that another nurse who I've spoken to since, she told me that she could see that her patient who had Huntington's was very frustrated with what he couldn't express otherwise. Yep. And she just used to sit down and talk with him, and they found comfort. They find comfort in that, and that someone's actually relating to them and talking to them like human beings. Yeah. And it helps them a lot. It helps them a lot, and that's all I can say to continue treat them as they think of yourself in that position. How would you want to be treated?
Kathy, the other really interesting part of Huntington's disease, and perhaps one of the other challenges with Huntington's disease, is the genetic nature of it. And I guess that question, to test or not to test.
It's a big one.
Absolutely. How have you approached that for your own life?
Well, I think I just had to think of my kids, in all honesty. I had a right to know for myself, but then I had to think of my children. Now, one didn't want to know, while the other one did want to know. And because I had a right to know as well, and I had a future to plan, so I decided, I'll go ahead and get it. But that didn't mean that I wasn't scared or nervous at any time. It just meant that I had to do what I felt was the right thing to do for my kids and for myself and my husband too, for that matter. And it's scary. But
Yeah.
it's, but I know there are many who cannot do it.
You don't have the faulty Huntington's
No.
disease gene. Was there any sort of counselling that you went through to make that decision around genetic testing?
Yes, there was. For me, I had to have 6 months of intense counselling prior to having getting the results, and that was they don't have that same intense counselling now. They do have counselling, but not as long or anything. But yes, they need to know that you're capable of taking the result whichever way it goes, because it doesn't. If you have the disease, then you've got a whole life ahead of you of worrying about it, sort of thing, and trying to think what's going to be good for me,
Yeah.
what's going to help me. Whereas if you don't have that gene, then you've got another whole lot of circumstances to deal with.
You lead me to my next question, Kathy. So you get the news that you don't have the gene. I imagine that's a funny mix of feelings to deal with.
Yeah, it's a relief. It was fantastic telling my kids,
Yes.
telling my family. It was a mix. I can tell you that the day that I got the negative result was the day my brother had been diagnosed as having it. And I felt so bad, but he was just so happy for me and said, if only Kathy's okay, that means his kids can be okay. So, yeah. And there's a whole mix of emotions going with all the family.
I bet.
Yeah.
What about on the flip side, Kathy? If you go through the genetic testing, it's a positive test, you've got the faulty gene. How do you live your life there? Are there things you can do, lifestyle choices you can make, health choices you can make to try and ward off the progress of Huntington's disease? What happens when you get that positive result?
Okay, so I know that my brother and one of the sisters just got very intently into their own interests.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, my brother, who used to ride the bike all the time, he explained to me why. He said he used to follow the dotted line in the middle of the road. And I say, and why did you do that? And he said, because it was training his brain. He saw it as training his brain, hoping it would hold off the disease, the intenseness of the disease for as long as possible. So, yeah, they have their ways.
And it comes back to quality of life. What do I like doing? Where do I get joy from?
That's
and
right.
Focusing on that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Kathy, there's no cure for Huntington's disease.
No.
Where's research at? Are there scientists on this working on it?
Yeah, they're researching all the time, not just here in Australia, but all over the world. They're researching all the time and looking into things. At this time, there is still no cure. I don't see it from what I have discussed with the Huntington's, the researchers and that. There's no cure as such for the next couple of generations, but they hope to be able to have something that will help with the symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they keep on doing. They're increasingly looking into what can help with the symptoms.
Yes. How long do people tend to live for with Huntington's disease?
Depends a lot, but say 20, 25 years. And it depends on how they get it. And it also depends on their own state of mind, as in their own whether they want to live, basically, and if their quality of life is worth living for. One of the sisters, she was very positive. She kept on going. She just lived her life, and until one day, I went and saw her. She was in a facility, and I encouraged her to let me feed her. And she did. Yep, she'll do it for me. The next day, no more. That's it. I'm done. And I could just tell it was a definite, I've had enough.
Mm-hmm.
My father too, he wasn't impressed. He inherited this disease his mum had. He didn't want to go on. He actually hit a tree, but it didn't work. And then there's the other ones who had children, and they just hung in there as much as they could for their kids.
It's devastating that people with Huntington's disease turn to things like taking their own life
They do.
Where does voluntary assisted dying sit within the Huntington's community?
In all honesty, I have not looked into that, so I can't tell you that. But I can understand them wanting to do it. Totally.
Yeah.
So,
Kathy, you don't have the faulty gene, but clearly this has shaped your life, shaped your career. Tell us how Huntington's disease has shaped your career, your life, your ambitions, your passion.
Well, it was more into my adult years that it really started taking shape in that way. I was aware of something, but it wasn't until my adult years. And then it was more of in later years. It affected me mostly, I think, to get it out, like doing what I am doing now, in that realizing that there wasn't enough out there, knowledge or education, and including it changes a whole family ways, and it did in my family. The dynamics were not as they used to be, and then I thought about my siblings and my dad, and I thought, you know what, things have to change, and there has to be more out there, and I thought too of the who are left in the family that are at risk, and I thought, when my time comes, I'd like to know that they're in a better position to get help to what they have been in the past. And so it changed my thinking into, because I used to be a volunteer for palliative care, and then that changed to, no, I want to help my own family's illness. And so that's what it's done for me. It's just made me look at it more personally.
It's given you a real purpose, a real passion, clearly, Kathy.
Yeah.
And I imagine time and time again when I speak to people for the Thursdays at 3 podcast, that the work they do, the life they lead so close to death, inspires the way they live.
Yeah.
Do you feel that there's not a day to waste?
Yeah. Yes, I do. I was just telling my daughter this morning, actually, that there have been times with this as I found very challenging. But then I think of like this podcast today. I think I'm helping people.
Yeah.
And, that's a good thing. And so it makes me feel like something happened to me tomorrow, example, that I've done something good.
Yeah. Kathy, where should people go for support, advice? Are there support groups out there? Where would you direct people for more information about Huntington's disease?
Okay. Every state has its own Huntington's disease organisation, but more recently they've merged, all but Victoria have merged to become Huntington's Australia. So they're a great place to start. And also there's a Huntington's disease network of Australia. They all work very closely together. So the difference being is one offers a support and the other one takes the contact. They encourage registration, so they know where everyone's located, and they also are able to direct you to the research. And so therefore you can be tested, join with the trials for research, that sort of thing. But definitely Huntington's Australia, I'd start.
I'll include links to Huntington's Australia in the show notes and make sure people find those links easily. Kathy, thank you so much for sharing your time and your experience and your family's experience with us today. We're all better for it, and we certainly wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy and I have been talking about some big things today. If you need some support, if you need some professional support to deal with any of the issues that may have been raised today, then please reach out to Lifeline on 13 11 14. Thank you so much for tuning into Thursdays at 3, whether that's via PCA socials or Spotify, and engaging in matters of life and death. You'll find advice, tools and support at the Palliative Care Australia website, where you can also make a donation to support our work. See you next Thursday.